I swear, it's like taking a Pokemon. 1 minute you're cute and funny, and the next minute you've grown a 3-inch spike shell. I'm Eddie Webb,
And I'm Chris Spivey.
and today we talk about issue 5 of the Ultimates here on Speechless. Welcome to the next episode of Speechless, where we're now going through the 2015 Volume 1 run of the Ultimates, and I'm doing an issue at a time, and now understanding why Chris suggested we digress to talk about Secret Wars for a minute back in episode 1. So I was like, okay, this is weird, but I'll roll with it, and now I'm reading, it's like, oh, now I see why.
Do you want to give a 30-second recap of Secret Wars? Because it's been, 8 weeks? Because who knows, I may have added some random surprise episodes in the middle of this recording drop that people heard about it.
Dr. Doom became God, shoved a bunch of multiversal planets together. Reed Richards stopped that and fucked off into space.
And you forgot the most important part. Miles Morales saved himself and probably the multiverse by giving the Molecule Man a hamburger that had been in his suit for weeks to months.
While that is great, that was not necessarily plot relevance. I mean, what was also great was that it had the X-Men 93 spin-off Battle World, which led to the X-Men 93 comic, which led to the greenlighting of the X-Men 97 cartoon. So also a very important consequence of Secret Wars.
Oh, love it. But isn't Dr. Doom always God, or thinks he's always God?
Well, yes, this was just kind of actualizing his intents. And also he had a white robe in it, which was a bit odd, but sometimes you have to change it up. I get it.
Well, I'm assuming once you elevate, much like I think Gozer from Ghostbusters was in a white fur costume, if I remember right, not some sort of greenish goo covered thing like Slimer.
It's been a while since I've seen that, so I don't remember.
Then it must be accurate because you have no
Clearly.
point of reference.
Because one of the things this podcast has proven is that our memories are infallible.
And that's what our fan keeps telling us, and we appreciate you.
No, we have more than one now. I mean, they even show up. We have more than one people show up to our live events now, so that's exciting.
You're right. There's 3. I apologize. I forgot the other 2 of you. You have my utmost apologies.
There you go. See. Yeah. So I'm still really enjoying it. Spoiler for we're gonna talk about next time, but we're kind of just really skimmed through issue 6 because I did read ahead, and it's not really worth the full episode. So we'll kind of roll our issue 6 and the whole series wrap up stuff into one episode.
Did you admit to finally breaking the trend of reading one issue ahead before the recordings?
I couldn't do it anymore. I had to see what happened next.
And you spoiled yourself. That's all we're going to say. All right.
Right. Well, in a way, I'm glad I did because it is a little bit relevant to what we're talking about for this issue. But overall, I've actually been it's actually been cool to kind of just read issue to issue, because if nothing else, it's not quite like it, but it kind of vaguely replicates as if I were getting these monthly sent to me, which is an interesting experience.
If you'd gone back in time about that 9 years, how you'd be a spry 20-year-old reading them for the first time.
Oh, you flatterer. God, no. I'd be a spry 40-year-old. But yeah, no, like it's something like I've just recently been getting into monthly comics again, and it is, while I love trades and collections, I mean I'll always enjoy them. There is something cool about the anticipation of the next issue, which is a piece I like.
I kind of miss the issue to issue collecting how I used to, because that's how you get like the long boxes. They're in covers, and there's a joy of having that huge box. You put it on the shelf, and you come back a year or two later and start looking through your own long boxes for a specific thing. I had the joy of doing that with my kid who wanted to get into comics. So I pulled down the dozens of long boxes and trying to find stuff that would be appropriate for her that would also be fun and engaging.
Hmm.
Because in a conversation yesterday, she actually mentioned to me, because now she's hooked on the MCU and she's watching like the first wave, watching all the MCU movies, and said, Dad, why aren't there any Black Avengers?
Oh,
And that was a fun discussion I got to have. So thank you, MCU. And she's watching most of them up through Endgame, and because she's obsessed with some of the action now in some of the larger movies. So the smaller set pieces she doesn't like as much. And she's watched my personal favorite, Captain America Civil War. No, sorry, I lied to you. Captain America Winter Soldier is my favorite. Like, that's my top favorite, followed very closely by Black Panther, because Winter Soldier has all the stuff that I love. And as someone that lives in DC metro area, maybe it's a thing.
right, right.
And before anyone comes at us, from one of our millions of fans, Black Panther is technically not an Avenger in the MCU.
Right. Yep. Now,
And
Black Panther's adventure in the comics sometimes.
Sam is technically not an Avenger in the MCU until, I'm still thinking it's not Endgame, because he's not an Avenger in Endgame either. It is not an Avenger
No,
in
because he
the
was
TV
part of
series
the.
either.
He was. I mean, yeah, he's technically an Avenger in some of the TV show, but
Is
uh,
he?
I mean, super technically, just because he's reporting to Shield, and that is what all the superheroes that report to Shields are technically Avengers.
But he's not reporting the Shield.
In
Not in the TV show.
I thought he was. I thought he was
He
because
worked for the government as Falcon.
right, and that. But remember, in the TV show, there's that line about how he gets paid as an Avenger.
No, that's a guy at the bank asking him, doesn't the Avengers pay? And he's like, no, it's more of a, you do this thing out of the
Right,
goodness
right,
of
right.
your
But
heart.
by the answer of it, that implies that yes, he is in fact an Avenger because he answers in that way, not saying no, I'm not an Avenger, and therefore don't know the answer.
No, I would disagree with you on this one, because he's in a bank trying to get a loan, and if someone thinks you're an Avenger, it's much like Ghostbusters again, like this analogy. Ray, if someone asks you're a god, you say yes.
So you're saying Sam Wilson lied on his bank application? What kind of Captain America is that?
Much like everyone else, I think, who lies on bank applications. And it doesn't matter, they weren't going to give black people a bank loan anyway in that town.
Which the show actually did go on to prove. So there you go.
So I'm putting out my assertion that Sam Wilson, Captain America, is not an Avenger to date.
I mean, we're arguing semantics here. Like as
Yeah,
far as
but
how
Eddie,
the action is framed, no, he's not a meaningful Avenger in any shape or form.
Eddie, do we do a podcast about random media that strikes our fancy that week?
Uh, kind of, yes.
So semantics and arguing is all we do, I think.
Speaking of semantics,
I'm not done yet. Not done yet.
no, you're done.
So we
You're
know that
done.
Sam's not an Avenger. We all know Bucky's definitely not an Avenger. But do you know who is an Avenger? Right away, almost the moment they showed up,
Who?
Peter fucking Parker gets to be an Avenger.
Because he's Spider-Man.
Bah. That's it. I'm done. That was the end of my rant.
There you go.
It's not true, but I purposely ended it because I could probably rant for about 20 minutes and then we never get anywhere this issue.
Well, anyway, semantics are a good segue because we still have one more Ultimate to talk about, and she has several different names depending on how you want to slice it.
The best, most powerful of the Avengers would have been the OG female Captain Marvel before Carol Danvers took over the mantle of Captain Marvel, before she passed over the name to the original Captain Marvel's son, who rolled up on her, was like, hey, that's my dad's name. It should be my name. But I won't go there yet. We're going to talk about Monica Rambeau, who I think is They're totally underrated in the comics, definitely in the MCU, who is so incredible they don't know what to do with the character. Long story short, Monica first appears in, I want to say it was like Spider-Man Annual 16. So that is where you would put a super
Oh
powerful
wow.
character in Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And you get more, like, her story is more told through a flashback. Like, Peter's in an airport, his spidey sense is going off about her. He follows her. She beats up some thugs. Spider-Man tries to get in the way. And you get a flashback of her story that she has so much power that she needs help trying to figure out how to control it. She worked as a harbor patrol person who was constantly being looked over by her commissioner because she was a woman. It was implied she was a woman because, like, they put these 4 dudes in the captain position, and he was like, "We can't put you there because you don't follow the rules." But she's like, "I'm more qualified than all these people."
Right.
And of course, what would happen next is that she leaves, and a scientist who is friends with her grandfather shows up and says, "I was working for a dictator because he would fund my scientific research, and I think he's going to turn my science project into a massive weapon." And he came to her to try to convince law enforcement to help. And she does what any other hero would do. She goes undercover to break in to try to find out about the machine. She gets caught. She destroys the machine before the dictator can do anything with it, which bathes her in, like, this cosmic extra dimensional radiation. And that's where she gets all of her superpowers from. It also sort of rips a hole in the universe that she has to fix. And long story short, she stops a bad guy. She gains the powers that we constantly see her have, which is sort of light control, but it's also linked to other universes. And she can do next to anything with her power set. She eventually joins the Avengers. Captain America says that she should be the leader of the Avengers. She leads the Avengers versus the Zeus. Single-handedly defeats Zeus by herself.
Hmm.
I think it was Mark Greenwald decided he wanted Captain America to lead the Avengers again, and they were going to write her out.
Hmm.
And they wanted to make sure that she looked bad when they did it, so Steve looks even better when he shows up.
Hmm.
So they depowered her, they aged her, having all her powers gone. Eventually, she gets bounced around to, like, Next Wave. She has a control device put on her by the Controller, who anyone that listened to our run with Iron Man knows a Controller is a B-grade villain that shouldn't be able to take anybody.
Yeah.
And she goes through a slew of different names, 2 of which are because of Gina's Val, who's Captain Marvel's son, came and said, "Hey, I like your name. Give me your name." And she said, "Okay, you can have my code name."
Hmm.
So he took Captain Marvel, and he also took, I want to say it was Photon at the time, from her also. And
Jeez.
they just keep bouncing the character around. The power set is immense. That's the quick version. I'll let people go and read on it. And if we actually do get into a spot where we start doing just single episodes about people, we can go into more details about it. But I don't want to give a highlight.
Right. But yeah, she's never, as far as I know, she's never had her own solo series.
She had one put out 2 years ago, I think.
Oh, okay, my bad.
It's hard to know. It was super recent. I don't think it was very well promoted.
Because I was gonna say, like, her and America Loans didn't have solo series, but if that's true, then America's Own does not have a solo series.
And in the end, I think she ends up dating Blue Marvel.
That's cool.
There you go. The quick overview of Monica. And I think we've covered all of the Ultimates except for their unofficial 6th member.
Who is? Oh yeah, Galactus Lifebringer.
Yeah.
Maybe we could talk about him in the wrap up.
You know who's going to talk about him?
Me, because
Yes. I don't know why. Maybe he's linked to a certain supergroup that one of us loves above all other supergroups.
yes, he is linked to Marvel 2-in-1, right? Anyway, so, but no, digression real quick, because you mentioned she appeared initially in a Spider-Man annual, and there's a weird point in the 70s and 80s where Marvel was reluctant to just put out a new series without trying stuff out first. And so they actually had a series called Marvel Spotlight where they would try new concepts out initially for a few issues before they spun them off. And there was another one that's a different title that did something similar where the end of the original Defenders appeared. But they would also frequently have them show up in there are two series where a known Marvel character would team up with another random character, and sometimes they would do introductions that way too. And so Spider-Man was one of them, and that was in Spider-Man Team Up. And then the other one was The Thing, weirdly, because The Thing was for a while Wolverine before Wolverine. That The Thing was in every comic for a bit in the 70s, and that was Marvel 2-in-1. And so a lot of times they would introduce brand new characters into either Team Up or 2-in-1 or the annuals, like you said, as a test pilot before they decided to put them into other bigger comics.
I used to collect all the, God, they were the Spider-Man version of it where they have Spider-Man and some other superheroes show up. And I remember that, I will always remember, I think it was cover 150 of the Marvel Team Up that had Spider-Man, it had Rogue and some of the X-Men on it, and it had Rogue in her green costume.
Oh yeah,
That is burned into my brain for some reason. I remember it being a good issue. But no, that's, for instance, Speedball showed up in a Spider-Man annual for people that
yep.
were the original Speedball.
Captain America made his U.S. debut in Spider-Man Team Up. That's actually the first time I read Captain Britain.
And ooh, but you're talking. So when you say Captain Britain, people are thinking of the current Brian Braddock, who is like all big and muscling his suit.
No,
We're
this was
talking
80s
the
Brian Braddock.
Wimmer build Brian Braddock, who was more scientist with a scepter
Right, yeah.
and a not as cool costume as the current one.
And he was college roommates with Peter Parker because he was on an exchange program.
Oh, I love comics. In that deep, deep bench of knowledge, sometimes it takes to make those.
Right. It's amazing. Anyway, so I mean, it really reinforces that what the Ultimates kind of is with the exception of Black Panther, is a lot of characters. Well, Black Panther and Ms. Captain Marvel, some characters that weren't really getting a lot of play in other comics, and putting them together to make a cool, interesting new team. And I'm with you in the sense that throughout reading these, I've been like, I wish either this comic had gone on or they had gone off to do other comics. As far as I know, maybe they have. I mean, we're reaching an era where I'm not as up to date on Marvel stuff. So for all I know, they may have spun off into various Avengers teams or whatnot. But this specific collection of characters is really, really cool.
I don't think so. I'm spotty on this too, much like you are. But I think after this, Monica joined a supernatural Avengers team ran by Blade and
Was that the Midnight
died.
Suns?
Or no, I think this is a different one. But it didn't do well because I think it was during COVID, and so there was different kiboshes on the comic stuff. And now she's off the board, I think, because I think she had her comic series for a while, then it went away. It's really spotty. And Blue Marvel, they don't know what to do with.
Right.
So, and anyway, we've already mentioned the character assassination for Black Panther that went on, and I think Captain Marvel's is back up on a swing up. But
right.
Spotty history.
Yep.
This one starts with my same splash page that I don't think your version has.
Yeah. Start with that.
With Blue Marvel giving the quick debrief. I'll just give a quick synopsis of it. This time it sort of talks about, it goes that last time they did some damage, the omniversal structure caused by the recent time travel activities, and they're going to keep us posted. Then it goes directly into Blue Marvel's private log that is the same link now as his original post for he's telling everyone publicly. And it talks somewhat about how they found Connor Sims, the Anti-Man, how he was once his friend, and it gives a little bit of the recap history between the two of them.
Awesome. As a note, now that I've actually finished, I went to the back, the special, because usually in trades they have like a few like variant covers or whatever in it. In the back, but they actually have the recap art in the back.
Oh, nice. Yes, that's it. That is the same panel just about for each one.
Which is awesome.
Just different verbs.
But like I had no context for it, and they usually talk about it, and then I got there, I was like, oh, that must be the thing that Chris is talking about. So that's really cool. So they at least put the art in there, which is nice.
It's brilliant. It's such a simple thing, but I love it so much. And it goes back to that principle that Stan Lee would always say, that like this could be anyone's first comic.
Yep.
Which I give Stan a little kudos for that, but I will always say this podcast, even if Eddie doesn't agree, is all about King Kirby. Done.
Of course I agree. What are you nuts?
Some days.
Well, fair. All right. So, as I alluded to earlier, the issue starts with what turns out to be basically a recap of key elements of Secret Wars 2015, where they're talking about how the Omniverse ended and began again, and it's talks about how it came through imagination, but through the panel placements and also from my knowledge of Secret Wars, this really means that it came again because of a combination of uh, Reed Richards' son and Molecule Man. So we see both of them
Before
pictured here.
before you go on into actual plot relevant stuff, what is your current thought about? I think that Franklin Richards is no longer classified as a mutant. Like, what is your thought about Franklin Richards? And you can give a brief one because we may eventually cover Fantastic Four, but how mutant, not mutant, cosmic being, human, and that spiky flow of their life.
In general, I've been liking what they're doing with Franklin. I think the him not being a mutant is going to be undone, frankly, because I mean he has been classified as a mutant since the 80s, and I think that having there was like, again, I get too deep in the weeds, but there was an interesting run during the last run of sorry, during last 48 because they reboot so often, last edition, volume, whatever you want to call it, of Fantastic Four. There was an interesting run because Franklin's now a teenager, and so he was doing lots of "I'm a mutant now. You can't tell me what to do. You're not my real dad" kind of teenage things, and using his mutant identity as a way to rebel against Reed. And I thought that was interesting because it was an identity that Franklin specifically uniquely has in the Fantastic Four. His sister Valeria is a time displaced magical woman who or a girl whose godfather is Doctor Doom. So she's got her own set of things to deal with.
And as it's on the screen, plot relevant, what is your opinion of Reed Richards' power of elongation? What I'm wanting your real opinion of the power set elongation, and I'm using Reed Richards as my vehicle to get there.
It was cool in the 60s.
Okay.
So was magnetism, apparently.
Magnetism is always cool.
Well, it was particularly cool in the 60s, so they didn't know what it did.
You could write words in the air with like metal filings, Eddie.
In
What else
cursive.
do you need?
In cursive. So anyway, we then move to a 2-page spread, which continues the recap, but we do see. Go ahead.
Sorry. Who is Owen Reese, the Molecule Man? Is this important?
I actually want to talk about that a little more when we get later into this because
Okay.
Owen Reese becomes more relevant a bit later. Or actually,
Cool.
no. I take it back. Didn't. No, it is later. Okay, I make sure. I thought I was like, did we cover it? No, it's coming in issue 6. So
We can cover in the recap.
we cover it in the recap because it's a little more relevant there. But Doctor Doom is more relevant here. Doctor Doom, the Reed Richards' eternal arch nemesis, leader of Latveria, occasional god.
Occasional Iron Man.
Goes to hell. Yeah, occasionally Iron Man. Occasionally goes to hell to find his mother's soul. He's got a lot going on. He's a very complicated dude.
Do you know the best story starting with Doctor Doom in it?
Which one?
When Luke Cage came over and pimp slapped him to get his $200 that he owed him. How Luke Cage, we talked about it before, borrowed like the Fantastic car to fly over to Latveria to get his $200 that Doctor Doom owed him to then fly back.
Yep. Yes. Doctor Doom is amazing. And so basically it talks a little bit about kind of, again, it's talking in vague terms about an outcast and how the outcasts tried to attempt a psychological gambit against Doom that failed, and so he was sent to exile outside of everything. And so we then start moving away from the recap to just pure blackness, and then a star-shaped hole appears in the blackness, and a ship comes out of it, and that is the Ultimates, who have finally made their way into outside of absolutely everything into whatever this is. And so we, much faster than we have in previous issues, on one page, we get the little kind of sidebars of everyone. So recap the whole team on one page as they are crashing, landing, a little unclear, excitedly entering this new realm. And we have Blue Marvel just saying amazing things. Heisenberg actuators failing, red lights on quantum subsystems 4, 7, and 13. These are all words that are happening. This fucking comic. T'Challa is saying very calmly, "We need to re-enter the Omniverse now." Like, that is a sentence that makes sense. But we see America, who she's the one who's been opening all these gates, and she's pushing herself harder and harder. We saw that last issue, and now we're seeing where she's bleeding pretty badly from her nose. She's muttering, and amusingly, I've never seen this before. I don't know if it's unique to Monica or if it's something that I just missed because I read these kind of sporadically. That America's nickname is Mac,
I
and
love it.
I love it. I think it's great because I was like, that's not like, but yeah, it's like you want Mary doesn't sound right, you know. Amy doesn't sound right, so it's like Mac is like, yeah, Mac's. It's a weird drop some letters out of the name thing, but I like it.
Can I also point out how we're getting the the images of America more and more being over pushing and straining her power set here? To think about that, up to these 4 issues, all the amazing things we've seen her do.
Yeah,
So it shows you how powerful and this is, and what she's sacrificing to do this in a great recap telling, because we have her like coming in, saving the multiverse by like dancing with her girlfriend, and then out surviving in space and environments where the Ultimates have to be fully suited up in armor to protect them, and they're already superpowered people that can do things. That she's just out there in it. And we've seen her do multiple ports all by herself, and to come here and through all this travel. So it's a nice recap of her power set, showing how amazing the character is and just how dangerous what they're doing is now, adding additional pressure to it.
I have not dug up the discourse around this comic, partially because I didn't want to spoil myself, partially because I know how comic fans are, and I don't want to. My life's too short to expose myself to that. But I can imagine people who have only read the first few issues going, "Oh my God, these guys are too powerful." Being like one issue they confront Galactus, next issue they literally convert him. You know, they're so OP, Mary Sue, blah 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 blah. But to your point, I think what's actually happening here is I think Ewing's done a really good job of saying, no, 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 that yes, they're powerful, and we have to establish over a few issues just the scale they're at compared to typical superhero teams, so that when we get to here, you understand just how bonkers the stakes are.
Mm-hmm. Incredibly well done.
Yeah. And so America's kind of going in and out of the city, and so she has a flashback to her girlfriends, Lisa Halloran, who's EMT in training, which if you did not read the issue or the Avengers Zero stuff in the beginning of the trade, seems to come out of nowhere, but she's actually the same girl that America was dancing with in that thing. So there's a connectivity here. It's just the piece it's referencing is outside of this particular run of comics. But we have instance
Are you saying it's
of
outside the Omniverse?
yeah, see, yeah. It's almost like metatextually that was the intent, except for that's probably not at all what the
Is
intent
not.
was. Probably no. But I love Lisa here because like they're in a diner and basically Lisa's giving America stick for doing the I'm fine, I'm fine. But she's doing that fine. And America's like all curled up and like arms crossed, like just every body language option of I'm not really fine. And then so she's sitting with her arms crossed going, I'm fine. And Lisa crosses her arms and goes, I'm fine. Grr. Just straight up making fun of one of the most powerful people in the universe. And then she's like, oh no, you're smiling. You're going to lose all your powers. And it gets America to open up and talk about how she identifies and she needs to be the person that helps the people. That's America's identity, because she had to raise herself up alone. She had to be tough. She had to be self-sufficient. And so when she is the person who needs help, that clearly very much bothers her. She very much prefers to help others. And so Lisa is like, everyone needs help. You have friends, you have other people, you have me, you have. She references to you have Kate and the Boys, which is a sideways reference to the Young Avengers, which is great. And it's a whole multiverse of people who want to be there for you. It's okay. It's okay to be vulnerable. As a side note, I do not know if it's in your scan, but in my version, at the very bottom of that page, in green, very faint green text, it says, "Vote Loki 2016, lies you can believe in."
Yes, it's there.
Okay. And I assume this is a reference to the ongoing Loki series, but it reminded me of when Marvel way back in the 60s would do that. They would actually put tiny little references and ads to their other comics, because I remember in the Fantastic Four comics they had references when they launched a Hulk comic the first time
Yeah.
about the
So you're
Hulk.
talking about the President Loki run.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because you say Loki series, people may suddenly think the Loki
Fair.
TV series.
No,
And they're
no,
like,
sorry,
wait a
no, sorry.
second.
No, the Loki comic book that was going on at the time, where Loki ran for president, which the TV series does eventually reference, but it was just a neat little touch, because like for the trade they could have just cut that off. There's no, they left it in there. It's a neat little, and because it's on the page of the multiversal hopping character trying to find something to believe in, having a little note of Loki pop in there was kind of a neat little counterbalance, I thought.
And for anyone curious, Loki does have a lot to do with the Young Avengers, because there was like Kid Loki
Yep.
who tricked Miss America to come and do something. So you have versions of Kid Loki, you've got President Loki, you've got Loki in the Thor run who is in Sif's body running around acting like they're Sif.
Right.
Lots of shenanigans with Loki.
Right.
Loki
Yeah.
is not the anti-hero that Marvel wants you to believe. Loki's a straight
Right.
up villain.
And the thing I like about this is, again, it's a nod towards a slightly older form of comics. We talked before about how in some very interesting ways this is kind of a slightly retro comic, and one of them is that I remember, particularly in the 60s and 70s, Marvel comics were very intertwined, and it got out of control for a long time. Don't get me wrong, but there was a point where you could read a comic relatively self-contained, but there would be nods and references and ties to other things to show these were all connected universe, but you didn't need to follow them, but you were encouraged to go, oh, I'm curious to know more about that, so I'd like to go read this other comic. And so this is the thing, is like, this is a subplot that ties into the Avenger stuff that America's going through. But if you're not reading that, you don't need to know it to understand what's going on here. And that is, to me, the sweet spot of comic book continuity.
This comic is making me want us to do and this conversation makes me want to do a run of some selected mini arcs from the 70s of some different groups.
Yeah.
Like some maybe X-Men in the 70s, maybe some Fantastic Four and Avengers from the 70s. And if we get a wild hair, maybe the Defenders.
I would love to talk about the Defenders. We could even
Not
compromise and do the Defenders Avengers War crossover.
and I'm not saying a lot. Maybe something similar to this, like between 4 to 6 issues, sort of a 4 to 6 issue arc, just
Right,
to get
right.
a slice of those, just to compare to like some of the more modern comics that we've been reading.
Yeah, that'd be fun. We'll put that in the back of our heads. But anyway, so America comes back out of it, and she starts to have a heart attack. And so Monica basically acts as a pacemaker to restart her heart, because Monica can basically do whatever she wants now.
Think about that, because I pointed out before how incredibly tough America is out surviving in space. Now you have Monica essentially being her pacemaker here, which also demonstrates how powerful Monica must be. It's these touches why one of the reasons I love this comic, You've got these immensely powerful people. They built up what they can do already, and they just then do things that fits the character you've seen, and it reinforces how powerful they are and how creative they are with their own power set.
Right, right. Yeah, and that this scene actually is a good example. Is one thing I've noticed throughout all these 5 issues is that if you come to this without any context, it just does feel like here's a grab bag of characters that are thrown together as a team, which Marvel, frankly, has done a lot of. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, DC has,
Like
well,
who? Like who? What team? What team?
the Defenders, for example. That's, I know what you're shooting for there. Um, Granted, that was the point of the Defenders, but like even like Teen Titans and DC sometimes threw people together. Young Justice sometimes threw characters together. So I mean, this is something that happens in comic books, and you could be excused for thinking this is that. But as you go through these 5 issues, in 5 issues, they establish a dynamic and a camaraderie and a synergy that makes it feel like this was a constructed team that specifically was made to have these exact powers bounce off of each other.
Which you could easily believe if the team was originally built by both Adam and T'Challa put the team together, you could think that they understand everyone's powers and they wanted to combine them to be as successful as possible for the missions they want to undertake.
Right, exactly. The didactic explanation is that this is a constructed team, and luckily the writing and even the art makes them feel no, this is a team of a piece. Yes, some of these people have had solo runs and whatnot, and they bounce between teams and whatnot. But in this moment, you can imagine a point where these characters were all completely new to this comic and were made just for this comic to fill just these roles. The fact they're not, the fact they have these long histories on top of it makes this team even richer in my mind.
And to pause for a second to highlight that goes back to when they brought in the new Giant Man, because you have this team of brilliant people who are scientists, and it breaks a trend that some comics do where like there's just science. Instead, these are our fields of expertise. We don't know this. We brought in another scientist or someone that knows his field to add to our own science greatness. And like that is so rarely done, but so amazing that it is here and demonstrated, which gives layers to all those characters.
And it's funny, but like you would think that by saying, "Oh, here's something we don't know," so bringing somebody else in, that diminishes the characters. But I argued the reverse, right? Because if and again, I love Fantastic Four, but Reed Richards is basically generic scientist. There's literally he knows literally every science except for social sciences, but he knows literally every science. And so if you ask a generic science question, Reed has the science answer, and you just move on with the plot. And so the point where it becomes dull, frankly, because Reed can just do everything. And they've walked that back a little bit over time, but it's hard to because it's such a part of the character. Tony Stark the same way. Whereas with this, if you have characters saying, "This is my expertise, we've brought somebody else in," that way when they are speaking with their expertise, you're more inclined to really believe them as opposed to, "Oh, you're just here to conveniently give me this plot stuff." It's no, I feel that Adam Brashear really knows his shit because he recognizes where his knowledge has limits.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it actually makes the character stronger by putting limits on them.
Absolutely agree.
So during all of this, the hull integrity of the ship is fading as they're trying to recover or have America recover. Connor Sims, the Anti-Man, is here as well, and he's muttering about the cage again as they're breaking up. And then it hits 0%, and the ship just falls apart. And you see all the characters are kind of just floating in not space, whatever this black is. And then from out of the page, this glowing golden hand just says, "No, everything lives." And we cut to Galactus the Lifebringer, Seeder of Worlds. Galactus is here too.
I love this image. On
Yeah.
like the next page where you have his Galactus's title, how massive he is, but the other characters are still large enough to make out because they're closer to us. That
Mhm.
is beautifully done. I love gold Galactus. I think more than I do Galactus with his purple hat.
Like when I first saw this, I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. Initially, I was again like, it's such a weird turn and which a weird switch. But as I've gone through this series, I'm with you. Like, this is something interesting with Galactus that hasn't been done before. And he is weirdly part of the Ultimates team now.
Yeah.
And the sheer balls to pitch a comic which said, yeah, it's a team that has Black Panther, Blue Marvel, Captain Marvel, America Chavez, Photon, and Galactus. And she's like, wait, what? Yes, Galactus is on the team.
Oh, I love it so much. Oh, I do.
And even better is Galactus saves them, and in his very kind of ornate, oblique style, basically is like, but if I wasn't here, you motherfuckers would be dead. But it's great. It's like, were I not here, if I did not owe you a debt as a catalyst for a new self, you would be dead. Or worse, we are outside in the great dark nothing. Even one such as I cannot exist here without risking trauma. Yet you come wrapped in thin steel. Tell me why.
Like the power of that. Oh, the gobbledygook but power associated with what you just read.
Yeah, it's like
Oh, I love comics.
it's epic comic book space nonsense, but also what it's really saying is Galactus going, even I can't hang out here too long. I happen to be here because I wanted to follow you because I was curious as to why you stupid humans threw yourself into the void to be here.
And what it does at one level is that we know that Eternity sent Galactus to go do things. But asking why, wanting to understand the purpose of them doing it, goes back to showing that Galactus was like Galen, whoever, who was a scientist, and
Mhm.
scientists wanting to know and understand, which then
Right.
reinforces the entire premise of the Ultimates.
Which is one thing that, and actually that's a good point, is one thing the Ultimates has quietly done, and we've touched on, but I don't think we've ever really completely pulled apart yet, is that it starts on the premise of these people are together because they have these certain kinds of powers, do certain things. And what each issue has steadily done is said, but here's what's interesting about each of these characters. This is a character driven book, actually, even though a lot of plot stuff happens. All of the stuff that happens is because the Ultimates go out and do it. And so it's about America's insecurities. It's about Photon coming to understanding that she's not human anymore. It's about Adam trying to give back to the world that didn't want him for a while. It's about T'Challa being T'Challa. But, that's T'Challa. He's an enigma and kind of an asshole king. But now we have Galactus as an actual character for the first time in probably decades in comic book continuity.
And you're and not only that, this book is so engaging that my 10-year-old I mentioned before picked it up and saw the cover and is reading it and enjoying it.
Awesome.
Like, that is how well it covers a spectrum of, we as adults are sitting here engaged and loving it.
Yeah.
A 10-year-old is loving it also.
Right.
So that shows talent that has stretched like the decades between different types of comic book readers.
Right. And so T'Challa and Adam explain that, we're here to get some time's broken, we're here to get some numbers and do some assessments and get some data. And Galactus is like, no, you didn't come here for numbers, you came here for fire. It's just like, and basically, yeah, it's like, he's reframing it, but basically he's talking about Prometheus's fire, right? It's like, I want to clutch the fire of the heavens and remake the universe. And he talks about how that's what drove him on Galactus. That's the reason why what happened to him happened, is because that's what drove me on. And it's like, why attempt to break free of reality itself? Because it was there. And it's fascinating because, like, again, we're in the middle of goddamn nowhere. We have 7 characters in this incomprehensible technobabble space, and they're just having a Star Trek style conversation of what are the ethics of doing this. And Galactus is coming at it from a perspective that is both complete within his character, but also one we've never really heard him articulate before, which is, I also was a scientist, and I made a mistake because of my hubris thinking I could do this, and I continue to pay for that until you changed me. So now I'm trying to stop you from making that same mistake as I perceive it. But we have Carol now coming in, and it's like, we didn't do this for kicks. She's coming from the soldier perspective. We had a mission. We're here to finish this mission. And it's like, there's legitimate danger to the flow of time. And so Galactus is like, oh, cool. Let me show you how time works. Let me show you how I perceive time.
Oh,
And we have a page. The actual page is only mildly interesting, in the sense of it's a cool visual of a straight line and other curvy lines and different kind of little circles showing different iconic bits of comic lore, and also Onslaught. But Galactus' explanation is actually the best explanation for how Marvel time works I have ever seen. I actually finally believe that this is a thing. So, how Galactus explains it is now hurdles from the past to present along a stream. Events and it accumulates and goes by events. Events have weight, and some are vast, others are light. But some events are actually, because they're have so much temporal weight, are actually dragged along. So, for example, something like, the creation of the Fantastic Four. We see one of the little things is the four hands coming together. That moment was so powerful and impacted the Marvel Universe so much that it has weight, which means that it slides along time along with all other events, so that the Fantastic Four, whenever you're reading them, are always roughly about 20 years out from their origin, even though in actual real time it is 80 or 60. And so that's how, and so Monica actually says the past changes, and Galactus clarifies it
before
shifts, slides, as does the future.
before you move on, you're giving
Mhm.
such weight importance to the Fantastic Four. One of those bubbles is Dum Dum Dugan. That is how important Dum Dum Dugan is. Why is Dum Dum Dugan that important?
Specifically, that is Dum Dum Dugan when I believe, when he was guest starring in the Godzilla comic, because Marvel was in the process of negotiating to get the Godzilla license back.
And we've got Iron Man in the red and silver armor, which makes me think Armor Wars.
Right. It has the original Captain Marvel. It has Onslaught,
And
which,
you mentioned
regardless of,
Onslaught, but in the background, we can't forget him, the Two Gun Kid.
right, because we have talked about how Two Gun Kin is just a vortex of fucking chronological nonsense. Right, but and like, and jumping ahead slightly, it also shows pictures of Cable and Bishop and a couple other characters.
Deathlock.
Right, which
Why?
there's no
Is
time to talk about Deathlock. It's way too complicated. Deathlock's awesome. Look him up. But
and a
it
future
points out,
Avengers team because I think that's Luke Cage and Jessica Jones's daughter in the Captain America outfit.
yeah, I think that is the Avengers team after Young Avengers when the Young Avengers went through time. I think. But it talks about how future events get changed by the weight of past events sliding down the time, which also explains things like how Marvel 2099 constantly keeps getting changed. Because Marvel 2099 has changed like 4 or 5 times now.
You were
So
a big 2099 fan, right?
I am, yes.
I've never been a big fan of it. Can you explain to me then? We're going to take a total sidetrack now because that's what we do sometimes. Punisher 2099.
Right.
Who is did Frank Castle go into the future? Is that like a
No.
descendant of Frank Castle? I'm just curious. Did they say, that Punisher guy killing people a bajillion years ago? That's my hero.
Yes. So basically, long story short, actually, I kind of like. So, quick digression of the digression. Punishment 99, the original comic was written by Pat Mills, who did a bunch of 2000 AD stuff. So he basically hired someone from England who's written for stuff like Judge Dredd and said, yeah, write for Marvel now. And he's like, okay, I guess do Punisher. And so the original run is just that kind of over the top, stupid, hyper future violence, right? But the premise for him is that all of the cops are privatized and owned by a company. And so basically, if you make a certain amount of money, you could literally just buy your way out of crimes.
Okay.
And one of the cops is like, no, we need to bring back old-fashioned justice, like this
Okay.
guy, the Punisher, used to do. And that's where
Okay.
the Punisher comes from.
Because I know some of the other ones, like I know Miguel's story from Spider-Man 29 and all that. That
Mhm.
Punisher I did not know because I did have any interest in the character. All right, cool, thank you.
Right. Also, the Hulk used to be a Hollywood executive. So there you go. And so basically, so future events become more or less probable as these past events slide towards them, as their gravity of these events change and modify. And then the weight can also cause the ripple of time to branch, and sometimes it causes parallel timelines, alternative histories, or those ripples can go backwards, altering the present and the past. And so the argument that's happening here is the humans are going, yeah, we're trying to stop because time is all broken, and Galactus is like, no, time is just fluid. This is how it's supposed to work. And
That is
yeah,
utterly ridiculous. You can garbage go up, and I love every second of it.
it is. It's complete nonsense, but it's also what I love about it is one, it's one of the rare times that Marvel writers are like, okay, I'm going to actually explain how Marvel time works, and it never goes well. But the reason why I like this one so much is because it's not presented as this is how it is. It's presented this is how Galactus specifically sees it. He is
Yes.
closer to the answer, but he is not actually the full answer because right after this, Connor says, no, he's lying about something. He's not talking about the cage. And of course, like, no, buddy, just shut up about the goddamn cage. You don't have time for it. It's like, no, I have to show you about the cage. And Galactus is like, yeah, okay, we need to stop talking now. Just puts everyone to sleep. So Connor's onto something here. And we're now in a comic book. We're not only has Galactus become a quote unquote good guy, but more accurately, he's inverted is more accurate. He's not really good or bad. He's just inverted. He is ostensibly a member of this team. And now we have a moment where Galactus lies and omits information. Galactus has
he
become a character.
he essentially does what the Doctor does.
Yeah.
Because essentially the Ultimates have become, in a sense, his companions, and Galactus is telling them as much of the truth as he thinks they can handle.
Yep. Right. Because he admits one of them has achieved hypercosmic awareness. The others, I gave them a simplified version of what really happens. So he straight up admits he was giving a spin on events. You're right, and it's exactly like the Doctor. The Doctor lies. He does it for what he believes to be good reasons, but it does not change the fact that he's lying.
And we additionally get, while he explained how he sees it from his perspective in a very simplified way, we still know that Galactus was just a person that
Right.
became a being like that. He's not one of the original like cosmic entities or forces.
Right.
So even his perspective is skewed by having been, we'll use finger quotes, human.
Right. Right.
Nicely done.
And that's and because what happens is that, again, you usually said before, we have Galactus towering over, like he has all of them in the palm of his hand. See how huge he is, and then we do the page over, get a 2-page spread, and now we see Galactus is tiny, and we see Eternity is huge, and Eternity's little nameplate is Eternity, all that is known. So this is literally the embodiment of absolutely everything, and is to Galactus what Galactus is to humans.
Just the
And
simple scale of that is
yes,
staggering.
and he's like, so you think you know everything, buddy, but I know more than you do. And there's some information that it calls it pre-cosmic minds. There's some things because Galactus still came from being immortal at some point in time. There's some things that Galactus cannot possibly comprehend. That only people like Eternity can possibly comprehend. And so, but because Galactus has moved from a pre-cosmic mind to a cosmic mind, he's uniquely placed to bear this knowledge so that others don't have to bear it. And so Galactus is like, okay, so who changed the cosmos? Who did this? Who caused this to happen? And Eternity says it very eloquently. It basically is like, you fucked around, now you have to find out. It's your task. Return to me and find out what happens.
One of my favorite phrases of all time, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Fuck around and find out.
Yep. Love it. Just love it.
So they all leave, and we go to the epilogue. We go back to the Outcast. Way back at the start of this issue, we talked about the Outcast who was cast out during the Secret Wars.
Wonder who that could be. You can't tell from the vague outline they've been giving us throughout the entire course of the comic.
It's a big white outline on a black background. And
once again, it's almost like Doctor Who when the fourth Doctor generates to the fifth Doctor.
Yes. So Galactus tears a hole to take everyone back home, and the Outcast wants to stay here, to stay with his new love, which he says is even stronger than death, which implies that his love was previously death, because this is Thanos the Titan. And again, that last full page splash page where we get the title of the comic, which is called Unimaginable, which is really appropriate.
Eddie, who's Thanos?
Oh, come on.
Who is the comic Thanos?
God. The movie Thanos is the comic Thanos, slightly less weird. Thanos is from Saturn? Jupiter?
I think they were different worlds too.
Right, I don't remember. But yeah, he fell in love with the literal embodiment of death, and that's where the original Infinity Gauntlet series came from, is because he basically wanted to get the most powerful thing in the universe and destroy the world to impress his dead girlfriend. Because Thanos is an MRA.
And literally, if you read the comic, which is not as good as the MCU movies are, Death is hanging out in a purple dress, bones and all.
Yep.
Watch it.
And they make out at one point. It's a whole thing. But obviously, they've been sliding Thanos closer and closer to his movie incarnation in the comics, and this is kind of where he's at. But Thanos was believed to be killed in the Secret Wars. We find out no, Doom apparently sent him to this other place.
One more deep pull for you to see if you can get this one, and then I'll stop.
Okay.
Maybe. Who is him?
Him is...
I didn't even give you the right name. I gave you like an obscure name for him when they first came up.
Yeah, it's Adam Warlock.
Yes! Who's Adam Warlock?
Not in this comic, and therefore I'm not going to get into it.
But you can't talk about Thanos without talking about Adam Warlock.
Well, I mean, yes, Thanos ended up being Adam Warlock's kind of nemesis for a while. So Adam Warlock is Space Jesus.
Yeah.
He was literally supposed to be the savior of the parallel Earth that is on the opposite side of the sun of this Earth. And he decided that Earth was fucked, so he left to come to this Earth to try to save it in the way he couldn't save the other world. And so he's Space Jesus. It's not even a subtle allegory. And so that makes Thanos space Satan, I guess. I don't know.
I love comics. And the way that Adam Strange got people to stand up to go and fight Thanos was that he went, like he telepathically assaulted Doctor Strange to convince Doctor Strange, and Doctor Strange convinced everyone else.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing and terrible. I do want to go back and reread the original Warlock comics because they're very 70s psychedelic in good and bad ways.
And if anyone is curious, there is in fact a her also.
Yeah, much less interesting. Yeah, yes, him originally was a scientific experiment that said basically, I'm smarter than all y'all, and just left.
Oh, why is my brain filled with this totally useless information? I could have been so many things, Eddie. Instead, I know comic books.
I could have been a doctor. Instead, I know who Adam Warlock is.
I could have been a scientist building a ship to go into the Omniverse. Instead, I know comics, and I have to read about other scientists going into the Omniverse.
Right.
In closing, what are your thoughts on issue 5? I'll stop pinging you with random people before I
I
bring up
mean,
Pip.
honestly, I've said this before, and I make the analogy like this feels like the kinds of things I love about Fantastic Four comics specifically. It's that kind of spirit of adventure, spirit of exploration, uh, cosmic nonsense. It's all the stuff that I frankly love about this particular slice of superhero comics, combined with the fact that they are a constructed team and that they're all interesting characters in their own right. They don't have the same kind of squabbling family dynamics that the Fantastic Four has, and I think it's to the book's benefit that these are all just competent professionals because it forces them to present characters in different ways, and I find those different ways interesting. Like there aren't many comics. I mean, let me phrase that. There are lots of comics where like, oh, this person's struggling with their humanity, but most of the times those characters are people who are not believed to be human and are trying to prove their humanity, like the Vision or the Thing or whatever. Having someone like Monica be like, I don't know if I'm human anymore, and her struggling with that is actually really interesting. Having Adam Brashear going, I'm trying to give back to the world and use my mind to do that while trying to also not be bitter about the fact that two white men got there first purely because I was in a coma is interesting.
And for Adam, you do have the additional thing for, since I still think this is Blue Marvel's comic, because you also get more of the personal piece for him having to deal with the Anti-Man who he
Yeah,
blames for like the death and destruction of his own family and trying to
yeah.
overcome that internal struggle. And T'Challa's just kicking it, really.
And the funny part is like T'Challa doesn't need to, right? It's like he's just this kind of pure vortex of ego that the whole team just kind of centers around. Of like T'Challa's just going to be T'Challa. Of course he's going to talk shit to Galactus. What did you expect? Of course he's going to do that. And it's great because it's good to have one person on the team who's just going to do the thing. Everybody else can then have their own conflicts and moral quandaries, but T'Challa's like, nope, I am still a king. Fuck all y'all.
And America Chavez, who is there from almost issue 0, I think is where it comes
Yeah,
in, is that she joined the team to watch them to make sure they don't fuck up. And if they did, she was going to take them down. So you have that underlying threat of her character that, is she really going to be part of the team, or is she just waiting to pounce on them?
right. Granted, that has not panned out in this trade.
Mhm.
That's it's something that's maybe it's in the second trade, which I have not read ahead yet, or maybe it's something that a plot line they would have picked up they never got around to. I don't know. So that's one of the few missteps I could think of. But I think for a comic that is pitched to be a long running comic, the fact that not everything is resolved in 5 issues is to its strength. It's leaving something to build on in future issues. That's good. So I can't really ding it for being a problem, only in the sense of if you're looking at this as a comprehensive reading experience from cover to cover, it does have failure. But frankly, no one picking up a superhero trade by Marvel or DC these days is expecting it to be completely comprehensive unless it's explicitly marketed as that. They're explicit miniseries that have a beginning, middle, and end. But if it's this is a collection of issues from trade, yes, we expect the larger plot beats to resolve because that's how comics are written now. But of course, like, oh, I'm gonna pick up the next volume. Manga does this the same way, right? So it's like I don't think that's again a penalty. I think it's just how people read comics now.
Nice. And I think that is a good place to end, because we will do a recap episode.
Yeah, we'll do that next time. And also, we will talk a little bit about issue 6. Basically, there's one conversation I want to talk about in issue 6. Everything else is just stuff that happens. But yeah, we'll cover a little bit of issue 6, and then we'll do a recap next issue. But until then, Chris, if people wanted
Next
to
issue.
next issue of the podcast, next episode.
If you're looking to support me, you can go and join the Harlem Unbounding Patreon, where we drop new episodes of Genre List for the Patreon feed that no one else here gets. And I occasionally write things that I post up there for gaming and other tidbits. And I am still chugging away on something that I was going to drop a month ago, but it is pay by post. So if I don't post it, no one's paying for it.
Right.
Where can people go and support you, Eddie?
You can find me most anywhere on the internet as Pugsteady. That's Pugsteady. That's my website. That's my social media account. That's my Patreon. But honestly, you can probably find me most days lurking around the Darker Hue Discord, where occasionally I post stuff like, "Here's a cool book I'm reading," or "Here's a thing that bothers me about I saw on TV today," because that's kind of where I do media venting these days.
And you could also catch me there trying to convince Eddie to go ahead and watch the new Doctor Who and stop all the work that he has to do so I can talk to him about the new episode of Doctor Who. But he's like,
I
no, I got to work. I have to earn a living.
Well, actually, since I have to watch a bunch of people clean my new house soon, I've actually downloaded them all to my tablet, so I'll probably catch up while that's happening. So soon,
Excellent. We have much to
soon.
talk about.
But you will come back here next week to have us wrap up our discussion of the Ultimates. So see you then.